The first time Elias Graves saw the Montana sky, it looked too big for a man with a past like his. He sat atop an old wagon, coat collar turned up, the wind biting through his bones, and the horizon stretched out like God himself was daring him to run further. But he was done running. He came here to disappear, to bury the man he used to be. Dodge City had taken everything: his brother, his name, and the woman he once loved. Folks there remembered him as the lawman who failed to draw fast enough. Out here, no one knew him. Out here, Elias Graves was just another stranger looking for peace in a broken-down shack by the foothills. The shack was small, just one room and a half-rotten porch that creaked like an old drunk with every step. The wind whistled through the cracks, and at night, the coyotes sang their sad songs across the valley. But for Elias, it was enough. Enough silence. Enough space to forget. He spent the first few weeks fixing the place, patching the roof, splitting firewood, and trying not to think about the weight in his chest. The kind of weight a man carries when he's buried too many people and not enough memories. Then one morning, while hauling water from the creek, he heard a sound that didn't belong to the wilderness, a cry. Not an animal, a woman. He followed the sound up the ridge and found her, kneeling by a broken wagon wheel, hands trembling as she tried to lift a sack of grain. Her dress was worn, her hair loose in the wind, and her eyes, the softest blue he'd ever seen, were filled with frustration and pride. "You're hurt," he said, stepping closer. "I'm fine," she replied, not looking at him. The wheels stuck, that's all. But he saw the blood on her palm, the way she winced when she moved her shoulder. "Let me help," he offered. She looked at him for the first time, wary, measuring him like a man who'd learned not to trust too easy. "I can manage," she said softly. "I always do." Her name was Eliza Harker, widow of a rancher who'd died 2 winters ago. She lived a mile east, alone on a small patch of land that barely grew anything anymore. Elias fixed her wheel, hitched the wagon back together, and before he left, she said something that stuck with him. "You're not from around here. Montana doesn't breed eyes that tired." He smiled, though it barely reached his eyes. "Guess I'm just passing through." But that was a lie. He wasn't passing through. He'd come here to stay, to die quietly under these mountains where no one would remember his name. That night, as he sat by the fire, he couldn't shake her voice from his mind. There was something about the way she carried her sorrow, not with bitterness, but with a strange kind of grace. She reminded him of what he used to believe in before the bullets and the graves. Days turned into weeks. Elias started noticing small things: smoke rising from her chimney, the sound of her horse in the distance, her walking down to the creek with a bucket. He tried not to care, but loneliness has a way of digging into a man's ribs, making room where he thought there was none left. One afternoon, he found her outside her cabin, chopping wood. Her arms shook with every swing, the axe dull and uneven. He watched for a moment, then stepped forward and took it from her hands. "You'll break your back before you break the log," he said. She glared at him. "And you'll scare off what little pride I have left." He chuckled, just a little. "Didn't mean to offend. Let me at least earn my keep. You can pay me in coffee." She hesitated, then nodded toward the door. "There's a pot on the stove. Don't expect it to taste good." Inside, her cabin smelled of dust and dried sage. A photo of her late husband sat on the shelf, a younger man in uniform, eyes bright with the kind of hope Elias once knew too well. They didn't talk much that day, just shared coffee, silence, and the soft crackle of the fire. But something shifted in that silence, something fragile, something Elias didn't want to name. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, he stood to leave. "You don't have to come by again," she said suddenly. He turned, surprised. "Didn't plan to bother you." She looked down, fidgeting with her sleeve. "That's not what I meant." He wanted to ask her what she did mean, but he didn't. He just nodded, tipped his hat, and walked away. That night, he couldn't sleep. The wind howled outside, and her voice echoed in his head. "That's not what I meant." Maybe she saw through him, through the scars, the guilt, the man who came here to bury himself. Maybe she saw someone still capable of feeling something. But Elias Graves wasn't ready for that. Not yet. Because sometimes, when you've buried your past deep enough, you start to wonder, What happens if someone digs it back up? And in the lonely cold of that Montana night, Elias couldn't help but ask himself one question. Was Eliza Harker the reason he came here, or the reason he wouldn't be able to leave? The snow came early that year, soft, silent, and cruel. By the second week of November, the land around Elias's shack was buried beneath white, and the wind whistled through the trees like a mournful hymn. It was the kind of cold that made a man remember everything he'd tried to forget. He hadn't seen Eliza for nearly 10 days. Not since that afternoon by her cabin when she'd told him, "That's not what I meant." Those words had lived in his head ever since, restless and unfinished. One morning, he noticed smoke missing from her chimney. No fire, no movement, just emptiness where her life usually stirred. He told himself it wasn't his concern, that she was strong, that she'd manage. But by dusk, his gut told him otherwise. He saddled his horse, Buck, and rode through the storm, snow biting his face like glass. The path to her cabin was half buried, the sky fading into a gray blur. When he reached her porch, the door was slightly open. "Mrs. Harker," he called. No answer. Inside, the room was cold as stone. The fire had died out, and she was lying near the hearth, a blanket half draped over her. Her face was pale, lips trembling, breath shallow. "Damn it," he muttered, rushing to her side. She stirred, eyes fluttering open just enough to see him. "Didn't think anyone would come," she whispered. He lifted her gently, wrapped her in his coat, and carried her outside. The wind howled, but Elias moved with purpose, like a man who'd finally found something worth saving. Back at his shack, he built the fire higher than it had burned in months. Steam rose from her hair as the frost melted away. He fed her spoonfuls of broth, kept her wrapped in blankets, and sat beside her until morning. When she finally woke, the sun was breaking through the cracks of the old shutters. "Didn't mean to trouble you," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "Guess it's too late for that." She looked around his cabin, at the rough wood walls, the rifle above the door, the stack of firewood neatly lined. "You live like a man hiding from the world," she said. He met her gaze. "Maybe I am. From what?" Her question hung in the air like smoke. He could have lied, said he was just tired, or that he wanted peace. But something in her eyes told him the truth might not scare her away. "I was a deputy once," he said finally. "In Dodge City. There was a man, a drunk, started shooting outside a saloon. My brother tried to stop him. I hesitated." He looked away, 1 second too slow. That's all it took. Eliza didn't speak. She just watched him, not with pity, but understanding. Finally, she said, "You've been punishing yourself ever since." He nodded. "Figured the world didn't need another man like me." She smiled faintly. "Maybe it needs a man who's learned from what he lost." Her words sank deep, deeper than she'd known. For the first time in years, Elias felt something stir in his chest. Not guilt, not pain, something alive. Over the next few days, she grew stronger. She insisted on helping around the place, mending clothes, cooking stew, even teasing him about his uneven woodpile. It wasn't much, but in that quiet Montana winter, it felt like a home neither of them expected to find. Sometimes they'd sit outside by the fire, wrapped in blankets, watching the stars spill across the sky. She'd talk about her late husband, Samuel, how they'd dreamed of turning their land into a ranch. He wanted to build something that would last, she said one night, staring into the flames. But all I did was watch it fall apart. Elias turned toward her. "You kept it alive. You're still standing. That counts for something." She looked at him then. Really looked. And for a moment, the silence between them felt like the start of something fragile and real. But just as the air grew softer, a shadow fell over their peace. Late one evening, as Elias chopped wood, he noticed tracks near the creek. Horses, at least 2. Fresh. Too fresh. Montana wasn't safe for long. Not for a woman alone, and not for a man with a past. That night, he told Eliza to keep the lanterns low. "Outlaws use this route sometimes," he said. "If they see smoke, they'll come sniffing for supplies." She frowned. "You think they'll bother us?" "I think trouble always finds me," he muttered. She reached for his hand, a small, trembling gesture that caught him off guard. Then maybe it's time you stop running from it, she said quietly. But before he could reply, the sound of hooves thundered in the distance, 3 riders, coming fast through the trees. Elias grabbed his rifle, eyes hard. "Stay inside," he said. "Lock the door." The storm outside roared again, cold and wild, as he stepped into the snow, ready to face whatever ghosts the frontier had sent his way. Because sometimes, the past doesn't stay buried. It comes riding back under a blood-red sky. The riders came out of the trees like ghosts, 3 dark shapes cutting through the snow, horses steaming, eyes glinting in the moonlight. Elias felt the old instincts rise, steady, cold, sharp. The man he thought he'd buried was suddenly alive again. He crouched low behind the fence post, rifle firm in his grip. The leader rode ahead, a big man in a long duster coat, scar across his cheek, the kind of smile that came easy to killers. Well, the man called out. "Didn't expect company out this far. You the fellow living in that shack up the ridge?" Elias didn't move. The snow whispered around them. "Not talkin', huh?" The man smirked. "We just need food and shelter for the night. Won't be no trouble if you keep quiet." Elias knew better. Men like that didn't just pass through. They took what they wanted, and left nothing behind. "Keep riding," Elias said, voice low but steady. The man laughed. "Listen to that. The hermit's got bark." He turned to his men. "Check the cabin. Bet there's a woman in there. Saw smoke earlier." Elias's stomach turned to ice. "Don't," he warned. But the second man had already started toward the door. Elias fired. The shot cracked through the valley, echoing off the hills. The man dropped. The leader's smile vanished. "You just made yourself a problem, friend." Bullets tore through the snow, splintering the fence, biting into the wood around him. Elias ducked, rolled, returned fire. 1, 2 shots, until the night filled with the sound of thunder and fury. Inside the cabin, Eliza huddled near the hearth, clutching a pistol Elias had given her days ago. Her heart pounded like a drum, every sound outside a knife to the nerves. Then silence. When the door finally creaked open, Elias stepped in, breath heavy, snow dripping from his coat. He was alive, barely. A gash on his arm, blood on his sleeve. She rushed to him. "You're hurt." "I've been worse," he muttered, lowering himself into a chair. "They're gone." But his eyes told a different story. One of them wasn't dead. Elias knew it. He loaded his rifle again, wincing from the pain. "He'll be back, probably with more." Eliza shook her head, voice trembling. "Then we should leave, tonight." He looked at her, really looked. The fear in her eyes, the courage behind it. She was right. Staying meant dying. By dawn, they were packed. A few supplies, her photo of Samuel, his rifle, and the weight of too many unspoken words between them. They rode out as the first light broke through the storm, the snow glowing gold beneath the mountains. After miles of silence, Eliza finally spoke. "You didn't have to do that for me." Elias glanced over. "Didn't do it for you." Then, softer, "Did it because I finally had something worth fighting for." She looked down, smiling faintly. "You think we'll ever stop running?" He thought about Dodge City. About graves and ghosts and the woman beside him. "Maybe running's not so bad," he said, "if you're running towards something." They made it to a small settlement by the river. A handful of cabins, smoke curling from chimneys, the smell of pine and bread in the air. The folks there welcomed them without questions. Elias worked mending fences, fixing roofs, trading his silence for a day's pay. Eliza baked bread, taught children their letters, laughed again. For the first time since Samuel's death, her hands didn't shake when she prayed. One evening, as the sun melted behind the hills, Elias sat outside watching her hang laundry in the wind. The sight was simple. Soft fabric, gentle light, her hair catching the sun, but it felt like grace. She turned to him. "You ever think about going back?" He smiled sadly. "There's nothing left to go back to." She walked closer, her hand brushing his. "Then maybe it's time you stop living like you're waiting to die." Her words landed deep, right where the pain used to live. And for once, it didn't hurt. It healed. He looked up at the sky, the same wide Montana sky that had once felt too big for him, and realized it finally fit. Weeks passed. Winter eased its grip, and spring brought green back to the land. Elias found himself smiling more, laughing even, though it always surprised him when he did. One night, as they sat by the fire, Eliza whispered, "You know, Samuel used to say love isn't about forgetting the past. It's about learning to live despite it." Elias nodded slowly. Guess he was right. She reached for his hand. "Then maybe we both finally learned." He held her gaze. Steady, certain. "Yeah," he said softly. "We did." And as the fire crackled and the stars blinked awake over the quiet Montana hills, Elias Graves, the man who came here to bury his past, finally let it go. Because sometimes, love doesn't come to save you. It comes to remind you that you were never beyond saving in the first place. Thank you so much for watching this story till the very end. Your support means more than words can ever say. If you felt the depth of this journey, don't forget to give it a like, share it with someone who needs it, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. Together, we'll keep bringing powerful stories to life, and your presence here makes all the difference.